In this lesson, we're going to add our first two form controls to the user form, and those are going to be the label control and the text box control. They're all available, of course, in our toolbox right here. We have this A button, which represents a label. A label is just used to present some kind of text to the user. So it's a static control. The user can't really do anything with it. And then to the right of that, we have the text box, which is actually used to accept input from the user. So let's add a label first. I'm just going to click this icon. And then the process is as simple as clicking and dragging to make it whatever size you want it to be. So I'm going to create a label here. I'm going to make it nice and long. There we have our label. You'll notice that it says immediately label 1 within, and that is actually coming from something called the caption property. We talked a little bit about this property in the last lesson when we applied it to the user form. That's essentially the front end presentation, or the thing that the user is actually going to see. So the caption for the form affects this thing at the very top, the header or the title. The caption for a label object reflects what is actually going to be written within the label. So what I'm going to do here is enter some kind of caption for the user, like enter employee name. All right, so when I click this, we're going to see enter employee name. What I can do here is click F5 to view the actual form in action. I have to make sure I actually don't click into the actual control, but the form itself. Once that's selected, I press F5, and there we see enter employee name as a label. We obviously still can't do anything with this form. Let's go back to the VBE. All right, now you'll also notice that we have a name property here, and I want to change this property immediately, and I'm going to go into naming conventions in a lesson or two, but I want to start coming up with a conventional naming scheme that we can use throughout this entire course, and this is actually the community standard, which is using the type of control first and actually assigning it a 3-letter prefix. So for labels, that's going to be LBL, so LBL is kind of short for label. And then after the 3-letter prefix that indicates the type of control, we actually list the entity or the data point that it's going to be storing or connected to. So this is going to be a label that asks the user to enter the employee name. So I'm just going to call it label employee. All right. Then what I'm going to do here is add a text box. So let's go ahead and click the text box icon right here. I'm going to place it right below the label. The label is sort of going to be the visual indicator of what the user should enter in the actual text box itself. So I'm going to make a text box. I'm not actually going to make it as big or wide as the label, and I'm going to show you why in the next lesson. So let's create a text box. We now see the aesthetics of it are a little bit different. It has a white background. Notice as well that the text box does not have a caption property. That's because we can't put text into a text box this way. We don't want anything there because that's up for the user to enter, right? However, we still have a name property on the text box, and again, it's going to have a default value of text box 1. The way that VBA names things is always going to be the name of the control or the type of control followed by the order in which it was created. So text box 1, text box 2, text box 3, similarly label 1, label 2, etc. All we have to do to change it is just modify this property. So the 3-letter prefix that's used to represent a text box is TBX. Again, this is just a shorthand so that we can identify the type of control that we're using. I'll explain why in a lesson or two. And then we want to also give it the name or data point that it's connected to, and this is also connected to the actual employee. So I'm going to do TBX employee, a text box that's connected to the employee or the employee name. Let's take one more final look at how the form looks now. So I'm going to click into here, into the actual form itself, press F5, and there we see our form. We have our label that asks the user to enter some kind of text, and here we have the actual field itself. Let's go ahead and move this up a little bit just so there's not so much of a margin here. So I'm going to go click out of this. And again, it's as simple a process as simply clicking into this thing. It's a visual aid, and then just simply dragging it up. We can also make the actual input box a little bit smaller, so I can drag this up a little bit, maybe drag this a little bit more to the left. Let's take a look at how that is rendered. There we go, that's a little bit better. Perfect, so we have a basic form here. The user can actually type in here. This is a completely valid text box, but we're obviously not doing anything with this data yet, but again, all of that will come in due time. So that's all there is to cover in this lesson. We talked a little bit about creating a label as well as a text box and changing the name property, which is available on both of them. The caption property, however, is only available on the label object in this case. In the next lesson, we're going to talk a little bit about naming conventions and why we do the things we do, like FRM, LBL, and TBX. There is a reason to that madness, and it's to make our code a little bit more logical and a lot easier to access specific form controls. So we're going to talk about naming conventions in the next lesson, and I'm excited to see you there.